Starting as a solo settler on hard mode, getting raided by the looters multiple times, and building an impregnable barbican are some of the things that happened in this 100-day series. It's been many months since I last played the game, but because of the 1,000 loyal supporters of the king, I've been encouraged to set out on this new adventure. So as day 1 started, I looked around the map for the right spot to put up my temporary house. Once I found the right location, I then placed a 5x5 stockpile to hold my inventory. I then started to chop down trees for wood and sticks. I then put a stick floor underneath my stockpile so my inventory doesn't get dirty. Once the flooring was done, I then put walls surrounding my stockpile. And as soon as the night fell, I also put one hay bed for David to sleep on. On the morning of day 2, I built a staircase and finished the flooring for the ground level. But I ran out of wood, so I went out to get some more. To progress through the game, I then made a research table. I also placed a campfire because David was getting hungry. Now more buildings require more wood, so I went out to get some more wood. On the morning of day 3, I noticed my dog retrieve multiple deer carcasses, and so I had David make a butcher's table so he can turn the carcasses into meat. David was feeling famished himself, and so I asked David to make a meal. After he had his hearty meal, I made David write chronicles until the end of day 3. In the morning of day 4, David woke up to a snowy morning. I then tasked him to harvest all the wild plants that he could, because during winter, all the plants will die. We can't say no to free real estate now, can we? Snow fell harder that day, and I had to finish the second floor. And so David got to work to get more wood. Unfortunately, the house was unfinished, and David had to sleep on the snowy ground. I'm sorry, David. In the morning of day 5, we were visited by a trader, and I traded my deer leather for an apple sapling, 7 coins, and an aged fine wine. And that same morning, David started to finish the walls on the second floor. I then asked him to make the flooring for the second floor, and in just a couple of hours, David finished all the walls on the second floor. So then he started doing the flooring of the second floor. And as soon as he finished the flooring, I then asked him to make the roof to finish off my temporary house. And by the end of day 5, the temporary house was completed. In the morning of day 6, I made a shrine and a backgammon table for David to use during his leisure time, which, again, requires more wood. On the night of day 6, I then planned out a balcony extension for the house. If you've been watching me for a while now, you would know that I would use this as a vantage point to defend against the invaders. On day 7, nothing really new here other than chopping wood, collecting wood, and building. As I was building the platform, I was visited by a fugitive. Her name was Allison, and she was overcome with terror. She begged, "Hide me. I will die if I am caught." And with no hesitation, I decided to help her. Now that there's 2 settlers in the colony, I then made another hay bed, and Allison rested the whole night away. On the morning of day 8, I was visited by a negotiator. This was new to me, so I had to check this out. I then tried to negotiate Allison's freedom with all that I have, but to no avail. I guess there's only one way through this, and so I left the negotiator and prepared to defend against the looters. Now I didn't really do much on day 8 other than ask Allison to write chronicles and for David to cut down more trees. So we'll go ahead and skip to day 9. On day 9, we have our first incursion. Coming from the east of the world are 2 looters wanting Allison back. So I stood my ground and asked David to go to the balcony expansion to defend Allison. Now David was no archer, so it was difficult for him to take both the looters down. Luckily for us, our dog decided to join in the fight. Things were getting out of hand, but miraculously, our dog managed to kill one of the looters, ensuring us the victory that day. David was badly injured after the incursion, and so he went up to take his well-deserved rest. And as for Allison, she continued to write chronicles so we can do some research in the tech tree. On the morning of day 10, since I'm living in the mountainous region with a scarce resource of trees, I then decided to plant birch trees near the temporary house. On this day, I also added wooden merlons around the balcony. I also added a small shed beside the house that will contain my stone workbench production. On the morning of day 11, I found out that Allison was a believer of restitutionist, and so I had a shrine also built for her, and for the rest of the day, both David and Allison just worked on the construction needed for the house. On day 12, I followed and watched David as he gathers more wood and finishes the shed for the stone workbench production, as well as finishing the restitutionist shrine for Allison. Day 13, and it was now spring. I finally got enough chronicles for us to research the furniture tech. The reason being I needed more bookshelves for all the chronicles they wrote. I have also managed to get my stonemason's bench up and running. And so for the rest of this day, I watched them turn my rocks into stone blocks in preparation for my future castle's barbican. On day 14, Allison and David have started planting the birch trees. After they have farmed out all the plots, for the rest of this day, I just followed David work on the stone blocks. On day 15, a wounded traveler stumbled upon our town and her name was Agasha. She offered work in return for shelter, and I decided to help her with open arms, because we need all the hands we can get for our future building projects. Later that day, I also made a boyer stable so we can turn Allison and Agasha into archers as well. Day 16 was uneventful, so I just watched Allison make stone blocks and Agasha write chronicles. For the whole day 17, I asked my settlers to gather rocks from the nearby rock deposits, and this was carried over through days 18 to 19. Day 20 was another uneventful day as I watched myself following David lollygag in the first floor of the house. Day 21, I just continued the production on stone blocks and writing of chronicles. I've also decided to mine out the other nearby rock mine, and this was the routine until day 22. For day 23, I decided to mix it up a bit by doing some hunting because my settlers were hungry. We also got visited by a merchant, and so I traded some of our useless resources for 40 gold. And up until later that evening, I continued to deplete the rock mine. If this is your first time hearing of this game, you'll get a lot of uneventful days like this on day 24, where just like the other uneventful days, I just gathered more and more resources. Day 25 marks the first day of summer. I was also visited today by a friendly visitor from the Heresy of the Rose. This must be from the new update of the game, but unfortunately, I haven't had the time to have a druid myself. Maybe on the next 100 days. On the morning of day 26, David finished the sewing station, which means I can provide better clothing for our settlers. I also continued mining the last bit of rock mine near the house, and to finish the day off, I just continued writing more chronicles for our future researches. Days 27 to 28 were the most uninteresting days that have happened so far. Nothing really new happened except for me gathering wood, writing chronicles, and gathering more construction materials for my future building projects. Days 29 to 30 marks the start of my barbican project. I started to lay out the foundation by putting limestone block stairs that would ramp down from my house towards the lower level, and placing another set of stairs from my house going to the next level. Unfortunately for day 31, my plans for construction was put on halt because I got my very first rebellious settler due to hunger. And so on that morning, I've tasked my settlers to do some hunting. However, later that night, some of my settlers were still hungry and became rebellious, which would slow me down yet again another day. So on the morning of day 32, I tried to balance the work and the food production for my settlers. With my food in check, I then started to lay out the blueprint for the towers of my barbican, and my settlers spent the whole day building my barbican gatehouse for the upper level. On day 34, I then started to lay out the gatehouse for the lower level of the barbican. I also started to make a gatehouse facing the east and the west parts of the map, and my settlers have once again spent the whole afternoon building the blueprints. I spent the whole day 35 building ladder accesses for the towers, worrying about my inventory space, and gathering iron nuggets for the reinforced doors of the barbican. I also built a smelting furnace on top of the balcony, out of reach of any raiders that might attack us, and reorganized my tree farm. And this was carried over until day 36. But before day 36 ends, I have also started to mine out the rocks behind the house, because I will need a hecton of stone blocks for my barbecue. The design of my barbican is not the typical enclosed fortified structure. Instead, I opt to go with an open layout structure. So in the same morning, my settlers started to build all the blueprints that I have placed earlier. Later that afternoon, we were again visited by another lone traveler. Osfrith was his name, and he had been bleeding from a deep gash and needed to rest. And so we accepted him in the colony with a brand new haybed. Day 38 was another day dedicated to the construction of the barbican. I, however, spent day 39 hunting for game to rid my settlers of boredom from construction. But soon after the hunt, it was back to work they go. I dedicated day 40 to more resource gathering for the rocks because I know I would need more stone blocks for the barbican. I also finished the reinforced doors on my gatehouse on the upper level. I then started to lay out the flooring for the second floor of the barbican. I continued the construction of the second floor on day 41. And by the end of day 41, this is what I had to work around. Day 42 started with the deconstruction of the old balcony because I had no need for it since I will be using the new and improved barbican walls. I then marked new rock tiles to be mined out. I have also started to build limestone block merlons surrounding the second floor of the barbican. And for the rest of the day, my settlers worked on finishing the floorings on the second floor. I spent day 43 producing more stone blocks for the barbican. I spent days 44 and 45 building more walls around the barbican and finishing off the design for the second floor, and I watched them build all that I asked them to do. On the morning of day 46, my settlers have completely destroyed the balcony, and I have partially finished the second floor of the barbican. Day 47 was dedicated once more on the building and beautification of the barbican. On this day, I've also traded extra resources for 141 gold, which will come in handy for a future event. And by the morning of day 48, the second floor of the barbican is complete. So now I added the final floors for the last two towers on the south side of the barbican. Day 49 and we're about to finish with the final construction on the south tower. But unfortunately, I ran out of resources, and so I marked new rock tiles to be mined out by the settlers. While I was working on the construction and the mining, we were then visited by some looters that attacked us a year ago. The surviving looter brought with him 6 friends in hopes to finally get what they want. Thankfully, we have finished the barbican, so I can use this as a vantage point. Now all there is left to do is to wait for the looters to get close to us. Unfortunately, I didn't see them coming from the north side, so this made me act fast and had to lure them down towards the east wall, where my other settlers are waiting to attack. And since my settlers were not born archers, they had a hard time killing the looters, and so I asked Allison to keep going around the barbican, while the 3 other settlers picked the looters one by one. After quite some time, we have managed to defend against the looters, and we are fortunate enough yet again to see another day. And now that we're halfway through, I wanted to focus on building the walls around the mountain. But I've accepted that I won't be able to finish this in the first 100 days because of the amount of stone needed, and so I focus on gathering wood instead of stone. However, I still gathered some stones later that day to finish the barbican. Day 52 was also dedicated to gathering stones for the barbican. I built a research table on day 53 because I wanted to start researching more on the advanced technologies, and the rest of the day were spent on the mining of stone for the barbican. On day 54, I started to chop the nearby forest so I can start walling the mountain. And as I was doing so, a hopeful helpmate visited our town. She was keen to learn about us and willing to lend a hand, and all she asked in return was a safe place to call home. We also ran out of hay that day, so sweet loose bed were made out of sticks. I started to finish the towers of the barbican, and this continued until day 56. On day 57, I noticed that my settlers ran out of stone blocks, and so I mixed it up a bit and turned my focus on building the walls out of wood. The walls expanded until the highest points of the mountain. Nothing permanent yet, but a nice temporary big land to call our own. Nothing much happened on day 58 other than watching my settlers finish the wall. I started day 59 with a good old trading. I traded away anything my settlers didn't need for more gold, and for the rest of the day, again, I just watched my settlers finish the wall, and this carried on until day 60. I felt like making an excavation site for my limestone production, but I didn't want to ruin the exterior of the mountain any further. So I started to dig an underground entrance for all the mining that I will do. Aside from this, I was still working on the finishing layers of the barbican. And that was all that happened on day 61. As I was working on the mining entrance, another traveler happens to pass by our town. She promised to work after she was given time to recuperate. On day 63, I finally started mining through the excavation site. Now surely this would supply all the limestones that we will need. I dedicated days 64, 65, 66, and 67 to mining underground, digging one section after the other. On day 68, my settlers ran out of food, and so I ordered them to hunt a bunch of animals in the wild. On this very special number day, I went back to work in the mines. My temporary house was getting way too cramped. That's why on the morning of day 70, I started to construct new buildings in my walled area, starting with my great hall and kitchen. My settlers also needed a place for storage, and so I built a new storehouse beside the first structure. On this day, I also transferred my birch farm inside of the walls. And to end this day, I finish it off with some good old trading away unnecessary materials for more gold. I spent the whole day of day 72 watching my settlers finish all the construction. I then spent day 73 finishing all the interiors of the two structures. On the morning of day 74, we were visited by a figure from the Church of the Third Coming. He sought an audience to strike a deal with us, but this was no urgent matter, and so I first built my settlers a new sleeping chamber. Once that was done, I then asked David to meet with the figure and struck a deal. This deal, however, required us to give all our gold coins. We did avoid a potential incursion, but at the expense of our settlers' happiness. I deconstructed our temporary house on day 75 to give space to finishing the barbican. I spent the whole day 76 watching my settlers finish their sleeping chambers. Day 77, another day dedicated to hunting to refill our food supply. On days 78 and 79, I also expanded my barley farm inside the city gates, and went straight back to mining and gathering for more limestone. And right before day 79 ended, another settler appeared in our town's doorstep asking for aid and protection from the looters. And in a heartbeat, Dartford's inhabitants decided to help Jill. With the search party arriving in roughly about half a day, I should have prepared my settlers for the upcoming incursion with proper weapons and armor. But instead, they were doing all these unnecessary gardening work, and soon enough later that night, a negotiator appeared at the edge of the world. I didn't have much resources to negotiate with, and so I just focused on expanding the mine, and because we didn't negotiate with them, it was inevitable for the looters to appear at our doorstep. The incursion starts and 12 enemies appeared. The horn sounded and it was time for war, 10 of which rushed the barbican, and the other 2 manning the trebuchets. They started to bombard my wooden walls with the trebs. Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this. I then ordered my settlers to defend from the walls of the barbican. With a lucky shot from one of their trebs, they managed to damage 5 of my settlers. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. And as soon as the looters got near the barbican, my settlers peppered them with arrows. My heart was racing because we were not bringing them down as fast as I would have liked. This is a reminder for me to train my settlers in archery. I was then shocked to see the looters have diverted their attention, not realizing that the trebuchets have already destroyed my wooden walls. But no matter, we've managed to at least take some of them down. It was already the morning of day 82 and we have been breached. No walls can protect us now, and it was time to fight in the open field. One by one, we took them down to the best of our abilities, and by the second hour of day 82, we have won the incursion. We have lost wooden walls, skeps, and blood, but our settlers are fortunate enough to live on another day. A lot were damaged during the war, And so, unfortunately, all the resource gathering and construction were put on hold to give way to the repairs needed in the town. On day 83, I sat back and watched my settlers live their lives and accomplish tasks they were scheduled to do. On day 84, I tasked them to expand the garden and later on expand to the mines as well. I also started building a blacksmith later that night, and since there were roughly about 2 weeks left in the series, I've continued the completion of the Barbican. I don't know why, but day 85 feels like it was full of lollygagging. On day 86, I started the day with good old trading, acquiring gold coins, apple saplings, apples, and barley with some of my beeswax. And for the rest of this day, I watched my settlers finish the building phase of the Barbican, and all that was left was the west wall. I upgraded my settlers' weapon and armor the following day, turning bowmen to arbalists and changing their caps into light helmets. On the morning of day 88, I've put into blueprint the remaining section of the west wall. And since we were lacking on the stone block resource, I watched my settlers gather more stones from the mines below. And this went on until days 89 and 90. And surely enough, as soon as resources were sufficient, I then continued and watched the construction of the west wall from days 91 to 92. I also built another entrance to the excavation site near the west wall of the Barbican, giving my settlers easier and faster access to the mines, rather than the entrance by the south wall. I was also visited by another negotiator later today, and with ample resource to negotiate with, I learned from my past incursion and built a secondary wall to prevent any type of breach to my town. Day 93 was yet again one of those uneventful days, where the only notable things that happened were mine expansion and hunting because we were running out of food. On the first hour of day 94, 11 enemies appeared on the edge of the world, and luckily for us, they didn't bring any trebuchets. I had to cut my settlers' sleep short and ordered them to station themselves on the west wall. And now that we're more prepared than the previous attacks, we managed to cut their troops down one by one, ensuring us the victory by the fourth hour. And sure enough, Dartford's influence was flourishing, attracting both settlers and unwanted attention from neighboring settlements. There was no other special thing that happened this day, so I just spent this day building more storages for my inventory, and eventually building an armorer's table to improve my settlement's armory. For day 95, I just spent the whole day expanding the excavation site. I also built the new mining entrance on day 96, and this went on until day 97. I spent day 98 once again trading for gold coins and some limestone bricks and adding small details to the new mining entrance. Day 99 and all the construction were finished. All that needs to be done now are the writing of the chronicles for the much needed tech upgrades for the next 100-day series. I expanded to multiple mining chambers to increase the supply of our limestone bricks to our ever-demand heavy Dartford, and watched the sun set on the town as the settlers ran their own lives.